As Japheth mentioned, I'll be turning it over to each of our panelists one by one. I'll be taking the firms in alphabetical order, so we will go with Gregor from Altman Solon, then Ron from Bain, then Karl from Capgemini, and lastly Dan from Strategy and. So to each of you, I'd like you to briefly introduce yourselves. I'd love to hear what type of work that you personally focus on and what typical engagements that you're involved in could look like. I'd love to know why you chose to focus your career in the TMT space. And then last but not least, we do have, as Japheth mentioned, lots of folks who might be looking to break into the TMT and or consulting industries today. So I'd love to hear a little about whether your firm is hiring right now, and if you are you open to sponsoring international candidates for United States roles? With that said, Gregor Eichler from Altman Solon, 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Lovely. Thanks a lot, Rick. And nice to meet everybody virtually. I'm Gregor. I'm a principal at Altman Solon. My background is business information systems, which I studied with the German version of T-Mobile, Deutsche Telekom, which then also led me to be interested in the TMT, specifically the telco business. My role at Altman Solon, I mainly advise telco and telco adjacent tech players on questions such as growth strategies and organizational optimization, as well as investors who look to break into the space or invest or sell in that space. Typically engagements that I would focus at are one, as I said, commercial due diligences, supporting investors that want to, for example, acquire an optical fiber player that operates in the German space or in the French space, but also on the strategic advisory side for corporates. Think of splitting an integrated telco player into a network and a service business. It's called NetCo-ServCo split in the industry. And we also supported, for example, a merger of two large MNOs in the UK, namely Vodafone and Three. So these are typical projects that we work in. Why did I decide to focus on TMT? One, because of my background, and two, because it keeps me interested, because it keeps our digital economy running. And that's the backbone of why we can have this conversation here right now. As for the question on recruiting, I do focus on the European perspective. Here we are open to international candidates. We do have language requirements. And as for the US side, we are looking at a case-by-case basis from what I could gather internally. So bringing more the European perspective here, but it is always a case-by-case basis for these type of questions, the same as in Europe with language requirements.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Thanks so much, Gregor. So as I mentioned, next we'll turn it over to Ron from Bain. Same slate of questions. Love to hear a little about you, your firm, the type of engagements you work on, why you're passionate about the space, and of course, those all-important recruiting questions.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Ron Kermisch. I'm a partner at Bain. I'm actually celebrating my 30th year this year with the firm. I've been a client-facing partner for all that time, and like Gregor, my primary focus, though far from exclusive, has been telecom. And working with the carriers, working with investors, working with suppliers to the carriers. In addition to being client-facing partner, I've had a lot of different roles over the years. I'll call out two. One is I led our tech telecom practice for many years. And then more recently, I lead all of recruiting for Bain as well. A typical client engagement for me, if I take a carrier, for those of you who are familiar with the telecom industry, it's a tough time. And it's all about where do you find growth? And so the vast majority of our work is focused on how do you drive profit growth really in some way. And it could be exploring new business lines. So should we get into financial services? And if so, what should we offer? And how do we actually make it work? How do we make our B2B sales force more productive? How do we optimize our CapEx spend? And so a pretty typical engagement is, a standard Bain team will be a manager and 4 consultants, and we'll work with a client for a few months on one of these issues. Why TMT for me? I've always loved technology. I was an engineer in college. I was a programmer afterwards. And what was interesting was I worked for a couple of companies, one a big company, one a startup right out of school. And in both cases, we had awesome technology, great products, and they didn't make it an industry. And the reason was because all these great technologists didn't have a great business sense. And so they didn't end up succeeding. And I decided I was going to be the guy who's going to go back and solve that. And so consulting has given me the chance to keep my hands in technology, but still work around technology on the business side. We are absolutely hiring. Last year was our second biggest hiring class ever, and we're going to grow it this year. And we welcome international candidates in the US who are students in the US. So on an F1 visa, we don't have a capacity for those who aren't already in the US on some visa. And of course, we have over 50 offices around the world, so always looking for non-US candidates in those countries. That's me.
All right. Thanks so much. We're 2 for 2 on telco focused, gentlemen. Close to my heart. Former programmer too. Love it. So with that said, I'd love to take it next to Karl Bjurstrom from Capgemini Invent. Same slate of questions. For you, however, I'd like to add a little and say if you could help us all to understand how Capgemini Invent specifically may differ from other areas within Capgemini that we may have encountered in our lives. That said, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. And I was very confused this morning as we started because I thought it was a TMT debacle and discussion because we had the note today, and I'm Swedish originally, so I thought, oh, we're going to talk about the difference between dynamite and TMT. But now I feel more at home talking about TMT.
Good.
I'm 20 years with the firm, Rick, and everybody, and so I've been here for quite some time. Before I joined Capgemini, I actually was in the industry, not in telco, even if mobile telephony was born in Sweden. As you all know, I was in media for a couple of years, but then transitioned over and started as a staff consultant. So I've seen the work from PowerPointing and Excel hacking to now shaping deals with our top clients. I used to lead TMT globally for Invent, now leading TMT in North America, and also have the role of sales officer and head of industry. So I oversee all of the go-to-market work we do in the United States. You had a question on Invent versus the rest of our group, and maybe I'll start there. So if you know Capgemini Group, it's a listed company out of France, and we are now over 400,000 people, so quite sizable. We've grown through acquisitions and organically over the last couple of years. I remember when I joined, we were about 100,000 people. We're just crossing the 100,000 people threshold. Within the Capgemini Group, which is predominantly technology, SI, outsourcing type work, we have Invent, which is about 13,000 people that focuses on management consulting and innovation type work. We saw a couple of years ago, this is about 2010, 2013, that digital transformation was coming. We partnered with the MIT to define what that space would look like. And we saw that the kind of typical traditional management consulting that I represent, that many, I guess, here represent, wasn't going to cut it in the new world. So we added a bunch of other facets to what now is Invent, from design, from data and AI now, and also technology advice. So we focus on bringing things from idea all the way to market. So we focus on making it real. And for me, that has meant over the years that I've been helping to define and launch products that now make billions of dollars for clients, which is pretty exciting. Getting things to glass is really exciting, I think. But it can also mean working with clients to make sure their platforms and operating models are set up for success to now diffuse and consume AI in the company and drive efficiencies in different ways. So making it real means different things in different contexts. Another thing that's been very exciting for me is being able to work across every continent in the world except Antarctica. So Rick, Dan, or anybody, if you want to partner and do something cool in Antarctica, I'm happy to jump on a boat. But otherwise, have had clients across the world, and I think that's one of the most interesting things working in this space. I love TMT. I think it is dynamite, and I've worked across all the three aspects of it. So done telco, media, and different kinds of tech, and done it across the world. We are hiring. We're hiring in the United States. We're hiring in Europe. We're also hiring in the Middle East and Asia to some extent. And I don't see us changing that anytime soon. We are starting to get our footing on how we apply AI in the right way with our teams, and maybe we'll come back to that question later, Rick. But yeah, thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure, and thanks for educating me a little bit on Capgemini Invent. Being such a big company, I've encountered it in many different walks of life. Great to hear more about yours. All right, with that said, Dan, well, back when it was named Booze, you would have been further up in the alphabetical order, but it's Strategy and now, part of PwC, of course. Dan's a partner there, and I'd love to turn the floor over to you. All the same slate of questions to you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rick. Really appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for being with us today. My name is Dan Hayes. As Rick said, I'm a partner with Strategy and, which is the consulting arm, the strategy consulting arm in particular of PwC, or PricewaterhouseCoopers, some of you may know us as. PwC is one of the world's largest professional service firms. It includes audit, tax, and consulting in all of the various flavors. We have a presence in over 150 countries around the world. Our strategy consulting practice, Strategy and, is present in about 50 to 60 of those countries specifically. We are really a very broad strategy consulting firm. At the highest levels, we work across all industries, but in a variety of different ways. We work in growth strategy. We work in cost structure and cost transformation. We work in technology strategy, and we also work in deals strategy. A lot of M&A work, as some others have mentioned here as well. I particularly have been in consulting now for the last 28 years, following a career in the tech industry as well. Like many others on the panel, I'm a self-proclaimed recovering engineer, and enjoyed my time in the computing and semiconductor industry, and then found myself in consulting, trying to apply some of the lessons learned and things that I saw in the industry. Today, where I work is primarily in the tech and telecom parts of TMT. I'll occasionally do some work in the media space if it's something that I have some relevance to. But most of my work really falls into two buckets. One is I do a lot of growth strategy work, particularly helping companies to either launch new products, enter new markets, or access new customer segments. And then in addition to that, I also over the years have developed a little bit of a focused capability around regulatory and policy strategy, and in particular helping companies with either preempting or addressing changes in regulation that often have big impacts on their businesses. So that's been a fun area to work in. It's one that you often see in the headlines, and we get to work on some really challenging projects with some interesting clients along the way. What I really like about working in TMT is the relevance of it to all of us. You can't go a day, an hour without reading a headline about all the things that are going on in TMT, right? AI is being driven by TMT. The semiconductors that are so critical to our global supply chains are all TMT. Right? The software that we all interact with all day long in most cases are so critical. The mobile devices, et cetera. It's a great way to really be current and relevant in so many ways. And in fact, we often get a lot of envy from other industry groups that are saying, well, wait a second, but now we have fintech and medtech and all of these other types of applications of technology, but they really all come from TMT. So we'll claim some ownership there. Finally, just to answer the question around recruiting, we are absolutely recruiting. We do hire international candidates. Across PwC, it's probably a little too complicated to give every permutation of it, but in the United States, we do selectively sponsor some people for H-1Bs. It depends on the role. It also, we do hire international students who are attending school in the US. And for certain roles, we also will consider international candidates. We have offices, as I said, in a large number of countries around the world, probably just about everywhere that someone is dialed in from today. So if you're interested, I'd encourage you to take a look at the PwC job site for your local country, and it'll give you some steers for that. Also, one plug, if you're a current student, we actually put the names and email addresses out of all of our on-campus recruiters. So you can go online and just put in PwC Campus Recruiting Map, and it'll pop right up, and you can look up your school and get in touch with the recruiter. I always tell people, make them your best friend.
All right, thanks a lot, Dan. Great advice. They are, by definition, people. They're waiting for your email. You should reach out. Also glad to hear that I'm not the only one that calls myself a recovering engineer, Dan. So a lot of helpful skills built there. Some things I need to push past, though, in my current roles. All right, thanks so much for the introductions, guys. From here, we're going to dive into our slate of questions. I've got a handful of them here. I'll address each of them to two of you specifically. The first question I'll address first to Ron from Bain, and then to Gregor from Altman Solon. That question is, Ron, the TMT sector is evolving quickly. What is one key trend you're seeing here in late 2025 and moving into 26? And how is it shaping the sorts of questions that your clients are bringing to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. The one I'd pick is that the euphoria over AI is over. And after a couple of years of everybody wanting to talk about how can they deploy AI, the question now is, why are we not getting anything for all of our AI investments? And what that's really led to is two really important questions that are the right questions. And one is not a particularly new question, it's been around, but it is, how do they have to change their processes to really make use of AI? And rather than just throwing AI into their existing processes, which is what many companies tried to do, which doesn't drive money savings or really change delivery time at the end of the day. And so what they're doing now is really going back to step zero and saying, okay, how should we do a particular process? And then how do we apply AI there? And they're seeing a lot more success in terms of getting the benefits of AI. The second question we're hearing a lot of relatedly, which is much newer, is how does their talent strategy need to evolve to get the benefits of AI? And that's everything from how do you enable your people to really make use of AI? How do you ensure that you keep your top AI users because they differentially are more productive than the rest of the organization? What we're seeing is 10% of people are super users, 40% are on the boat and they're traveling the way you want them to, and 50% either aren't on board and are actively resisting. And the question is, how do you hold on to those top 10% at all costs and get more of the next 40? And then how do you evolve your hiring? How do you deal with people who aren't adjusting? And so that's been a big focus with our clients of late.
All right, super interesting. So with that said, Gregor from Altman Solon, same question to you. What are you seeing as key trends in 2025? And how are those trends shaping what questions clients are bringing you?
Yeah, as Ron said, great question, Rick. Let me give another angle besides the AI angle, but that is also very telco specific. Is telco is a quite capex intensive industry. And what we're seeing is that some, if not all, many telcos are struggling to actually fully monetize this capex intensive asset. And they struggle to really capture the value. So I think, Ron, you mentioned in the beginning, you see like the profits under pressure as well. For example, the return of invested capital dropping below their WACC, for example. So oftentimes their performance is below expectation, also from an investor side. So the question that they have is, how do we actually generate value and return on the capex that we spend? And that has a trickle-down effect on the industry. So for fiber industry, for example, not getting enough penetration or utilization of the deployed network for larger telcos, that is mobile capex cycles that trickle down into now thinking about the Nordics. So for Karl, the Ericsson, and then obviously also Nokia, who thrive on these capex cycles. So how do you monetize that, and if that is tough, how do you actually then optimize for an industry where you're currently under pressure? So finding one, alternative avenues of growth in this, and then two, optimizing their businesses to line with this current market's reality. So that's the question that we are seeing with them.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to pose our next question to first Karl Bjurstrom from Capgemini, and then Dan Hayes from Strategy N. So we did hear from Ron that the AI mania may be dying down, some of the froth may be coming off, but AI is still everywhere right now, here in late 2025. Karl, can you share one recent example of how generative AI helped change the way you solved a problem for a TMT client, and the sort of impact you were able to achieve because you used it?
Yeah. So we are applying AI with our teams more and more. And I want to maybe share one example first, which is like at the very core of AI itself. So we are working with hyperscalers around their data centers, and we are helping them as they scale them at this frantic speed. There's no sign of reducing that spend and build out anytime soon. I think we are helping them to understand as you scale them, how do you detect and prevent critical failures in the different parts and components of the infrastructure. And that goes from the cooling parts, it goes to the electrical grid and power that's powering the server racks. And along that, how do we identify potential risks to the infrastructure, really to prevent faults, save money. And we've defined the algorithms and actuation processes to help this hyperscaler identify those faults and quickly act on them when they see them. This has gone from a strategy phase to now being rolled out to multiple sites and multiple parts of their infrastructure. We've so far helped prevent at least 5 critical outages, and it's been highlighted as a very successful program that now is also thinking to be rolled out to other very sort of critical assets, not just the data centers, but that one is like when you say how do we use AI? We're part of fixing that everybody can use AI in a way, but also AI is used. Agentic workflows are part of how we quickly act on those potential failures that we identify through our algorithms. But another example, which is much more kind of classic to how we define the consulting work, is in any piece of work we go through. When we try to identify a space for a growth strategy, we go through looking at competitors, we look at channels, we look at customers and consumers, and one recent example that we're applying is for the competitive analysis. We are building a prompt library that helps us very quickly do that analysis, and it depends on how good data we can also get from a client. We have some data that's proprietary to Capgemini, and then we have, of course, third-party data and broker reports and things like that. So also for specific steps in a phase 1 strategy project, we are implementing certain steps there where we utilize AI to bring either more value to the client, bring it faster, or with a reduced team. And we have discussions with the client typically on where do you want us to lean? Do you want it to be, do you want to reduce the cost spent, the price on this engagement, or do you want us to get further and faster into driving value for you? So those are the discussions we're having right now, Rick.
Makes a lot of sense. I love you highlighting their AI's ability to drive value across the full stack, right back to the data centers and then right out to the point of attack where the client needs it. All right, Dan, same question to you. Would love an example of how Gen AI specifically has transformed the way you've approached a problem with a TMT client and the sort of impacts you were able to achieve.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating question, and there's new examples every day. I'll frame it by saying that, about 2 years ago now, PwC announced $1 billion investment in AI within our firm, right, to really build that capability. And we have continued to sort of deploy that investment and roll it out. I always tell people that in the TMT space, we're really working AI from 3 different dimensions, right? One is we're working with the AI companies themselves on their strategies and how they deploy product. And, this is something that no one's ever sold before at the scale that it's being sold at. And so how's it going to work? The second one is we're using it, we're helping clients to use it in their own operations and get themselves more efficient, more effective, et cetera, by leveraging the technology. And then the third one, which I'll give the example of, is we're using it in our work every day, right? We're using it to make ourselves more effective, more efficient, et cetera. So, I mentioned earlier that I do a lot of work around both growth and regulatory strategy. I actually have a project going on right now that marries those two up. We have a client that's looking to introduce a new product that for the first time, and this is a Fortune 500, company, high end of the Fortune 500, the first time it will make that company regulated. They've never had a regulated product before, and they're going to be regulated around the world in the countries in which they introduce this product. And so they came to us and said, hey, can you help us to understand what we're going to be subject to and how it's going to impact our business, and then what operational capabilities we need to put in place? Normally, in the old days, a year and a half ago, we would have had, a small army of analysts and consultants who would go and look at the regulations and would read through tens of thousands of pages and distill them into what was relevant for this client and how they were going to be impacted. In this case, what we did was we actually built some custom GPTs and we pointed them at the authoritative sources of regulation, basically the websites of the relevant regulators in these countries, in whatever language they were in. And we said, here's the questions that we had. And we had a bunch of prompts that we asked, and we told them how to dissect the regulations, how to put them into effectively a database, and then how to analyze them and categorize them. What it did was it not only avoided a lot of the legwork that we used to have to do, but it sped up the project and it allowed our team to focus on what was really important and value add, which was we can get out there and work with the client and help them understand and process all of this new information and insights that they're getting to support their change and make sure that their product gets to market, which is their real goal. So, it really is a great accelerator for us, and it's a great way for us to focus on the ways that we can add value, right? Because the reality was pouring through tens of thousands of pages of regulation wasn't the value add. The value add was in the insights. So it's a great example from my view of just the power of how AI is helping us today.
Yeah, I think also a great example of how different life might be for a young consultant today versus 20 or 30 years ago, because they would have been pouring through all those pages. So certainly allowing folks to focus their energies on higher value tasks. Love the perspective. Dan, don't go far. I'll be putting our third question to you first.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking more about regulation, as seems to be right in your wheelhouse. So I'll pose that question to you and then to Ron from Bain. So Dan, the question is, TMT, of course, sits at the innovation, as you said, of innovation and regulation.
Yeah.
Can you share a specific time where you had a client engagement that required you to balance both? And what made that sort of work meaningful to you personally?
Yeah. I've been fortunate. I always say I like to work on stuff that moves the needle and where we can have fun. My litmus test is, does it show up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal? That's an old-fashioned view of it, but you like to see things that really have an impact to the world. I've been fortunate to work on a lot of those, but the one that's really interesting that I had a lot of fun with was we were asked by a major telecom operator here in the United States to help them assess the potential impact of a couple of their competitors merging. And normally you'd say, okay, well, what's the big deal? Two competitors are merging. Well, in their case, it turned into a huge antitrust matter. There was a significant concern that the competitors merging was going to cause not only competitive harm, but was also going to harm consumers in the market. And as people who we all buy technology products and services ourselves, it hits close to home when you think, gosh, this could really impact my own wallet and my own quality of service that I receive. So we were able to work with them to assess the impact of the merger and help develop some of the arguments that they then used before the regulators to actually evaluate that merger. And in this case, it happened that merger was actually overturned as a result, and it led to a completely different direction for the industry. And that was really impactful, and it felt good to be able to use strong analysis and strong development of logical arguments, to be able to help shape the industry as a whole. Even if it was in the background and working with one company, it had a very widespread impact, and it impacted really the entire country.
Makes a lot of sense. Super insightful stuff. As a part of my recovering engineer status, I'll share with you that I spent almost no time thinking about whether what we were building was compliant, even legal. That's increasing. It was important then, and it's even more so now. So it's great that you're able to bring that perspective to your clients. All right. So Karl, same question. Oh, I'm sorry. Ron. Got myself a little out of order here. Ron from Bain, same question. Regulatory, innovation. How do we bring these things together with the right balance to help clients? And why do you enjoy when you're...
That actually assumes that I do enjoy being...
Okay.
And telecom's heavily regulated, so a lot of the stuff you do where you want to do anything that's a little bit outside of the box ends up with a regulatory consideration. And one of the most memorable for me is a few years ago now, I was working with a carrier, and as I said before, carriers are really trying to figure out how to grow. One of the greatest assets that a carrier has is a lot of data about every one of us, right? And especially a few years ago when you had video, when you had your cable through them and home phone and mobile, they know what websites you visit, they know where you travel, they know, what you watch. And that's a lot of data they could use to serve you better ads, they could recommend programs to you, and they could monetize it. Google has much of this data and makes great use of it to serve you relevant content in ways that are beneficial for you, and they make a lot of money for Google. The telcos have always shied away from that, just given the regulatory history. And in a world where they really need to find avenues of profitability, this is really a lost opportunity. And so they always tread lightly. And so the work we did with the carrier was figuring out how could they start to go down this path in a way that would work okay with the regulators, and honestly, in a way that would be good for their brand, that customers would view this as a positive. And we actually did some really interesting things that we tested. So for example, they could tell that you attended a particular professional hockey game. And then they could actually tell which routes you drove in, or the majority of people drove in to get to the arena. And then you could have advertisements there for, giving people an offer. If you copy down this code, you get 30% off at, making it up, Kohl's, for the next week or whatnot. And then that's something they could monetize with Kohl's, and the customers got value. And then what we did was understand, how do customers feel about that? what were the response rates? What were the reactions? What are the regulators? How did they respond? And so we developed a bunch of those things, some of which the carrier then went and implemented. And so it actually was pretty rewarding in the sense that it's helping them find an avenue that is a win-win-win if it's done well for customers. And the regulatory aspects really were the guardrail that made sure it was done well for customers.
Yeah, super insightful. Easy to forget that telco exists under various regulatory regimes, which often far predate the modern smartphone and things that we think of more readily today. All right, thanks so much for that. I'd like to move on to our next question, which I'll pose first to Gregor from Altman Solon and then Karl from Capgemini. So Gregor, we've talked a lot about AI here today. I'd like to move off of that topic and think about your advice for someone hoping to break into TMT consulting today outside of expertise in AI or any particular technology. What skill do you think is most important to develop, and how might you advise them on developing it?
It's a great question, Rick. And actually, it is slightly, my answer is slightly influenced by AI, and the answer is adaptability. In a world where easy answers are readily available and the pace of work is also accelerating. So approaching both your interaction with your peers, with clients, as well as tasks is changing day by day. Week by week, it is different because there's new tools out there, new work out there that you have not seen before. You interact with people that you haven't interacted before, and being able to be adaptable to this changing environment now more than ever is important. For example, for Altman Solon, this is mirrored in us being a truly global firm. So we have one P&L. So our staffing model is also office agnostic. So you work with people from the US, from Mexico, from Singapore, on a fast pace. So you have to be able to, one, be adaptable to different cultures, and then two, be adaptable to different workloads. Back in the days, you might have done a task a certain way and only this way for, let's say, the next 5 years. Now, as you, for example, build a prototype, you might just vibe code it. So you just might want to try out vibe coding if you haven't done it. You might not want to do a presentation in PowerPoint, but rather actually switch gears and maybe moderate a workshop completely offline without PowerPoint to take it away and take things slower. So being adaptable to changes in the industry, to the tool set, and to the people that you work with is something that you can start building. And how can you start building it is actually next time you tackle a task, for example, think of the way that you would usually do it and don't do it that way. Just try to think of another way to tackle that task. And that's how you train your brain in a way to be adaptable as well.
Love it. Nothing like introducing your own constraints to push the thinking in other areas. All right. So, Karl, same question to you outside of anything specific to AI. Someone looking to break into the space, what sort of skill might you recommend they develop? And would love any advice you have on developing it.
So no, I liked Gregor's answer a lot, and I think to me it's the adaptability and flexibility. I think for me it's anything honestly that helps you grow is meaningful. And I was thinking back many years when I joined consulting, and the kind of three things that I brought up that wasn't necessarily just this is what I did, this is what I achieved in school or whatever, but it was I highlighted three things. So first thing was, I think it's meaningful to be in a selling situation in different ways. I used to do selling of consumer electronics when I was in college, and I think meeting customers and understanding and being comfortable of selling something to someone is something that I think is valuable for many people, especially as you grow in consulting. And it can be an idea that you're selling. You just don't have to sell a project or something worth dollars, but selling the idea and convincing people is absolutely critical. The second thing I highlighted was also a little bit off center is I used to play guitar in a band. And I thought that was also something that helped me grow. And one of the things that we do in consulting is you work typically in a close-knit team, like a music group, like a band, and understanding how to collaborate with people with a lot of creativity and passion, strong minds is important. So thinking about putting yourself into situations where you can learn that is important. The third thing was more related to work. My first job was in media, as I said before, and understanding in depth consumer behavior or viewer behavior is absolutely critical to many of the work that we do, and being passionate about going beyond sort of the most obvious things and drilling into a question through data is important.
All right. Thanks, Karl. I love that perspective on sales. Another symptom of being a former engineer, certainly for me, and I've observed elsewhere, we're not always the most natural salespeople, and it can take some acclimatizing. So sales, not a dirty word, and something that you'll definitely get more familiar with as you level up in your TMT consulting career. All right, so thank you for all those perspectives. I've got a final question here on the planned agenda, and to the extent that we may have an extra few minutes, we can ask some questions from the audience that I've collected here. I'd like to give you guys about 1 minute each. As mentioned, we do have a lot of candidates in the audience who are looking to break into TMT consulting. You've all been, in various ways, parts of the recruiting for your own organization. I'd love it if you can share with me what stands out to you about a candidate. What's a quality that when you recognize in a candidate, it makes you say, hey, this person stands out from the crowd or would be a really great fit here. I'd love to take these again just in alphabetical order by firm. So Gregor, that puts you up first.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'd like to answer with curiosity and deep curiosity, because it does show that candidates are eager to understand problems in depth, so that they go beyond the easy answer, especially in the age of AI, where the easy answer is readily available and clients are looking for this nuance that you can bring with curiosity and going deep where it matters. So having the breadth, but the curiosity to go deep on where it matters. And if you can show this in the interview, that also highlights to me that you are somebody who's willing to take agency of your own work stream, and drive it end to end, because you're curious enough to want to understand it from the beginning and want to see it through to the end. And that is also the quality of a great consultant: end-to-end ownership and driving things forward with an open and curious mind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Nope, okay. We had a little bit of static going on there, but I think it's fine now. Love that perspective. Thank you so much. That'll take us to Ron from Bain. Same question to you. What makes candidates stand out when they interview with Bain?
The same answer, curiosity. So I'll give you my second answer, which is resilience. Consulting is hard, and if you're really having an impact, the answer is not the hard part. Getting organizations to change and how they work and what they do, or to make a new investment, that's what's hard. And if it were easy, they wouldn't spend all the money on a consultant to come in. And so how do you stick with it? Is when you're getting all the pushback from clients on a particular issue, or whatnot. And so we really look for candidates who, both in their background that they submit to us, but also in the interview, just show this willingness to stick with it and fight through it and get to the answer and the recommendation and defend it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Former mentor of mine from McKinsey used to always say, being right is not good enough. Not sure I knew what he meant the first time he said it, but eventually I came to understand that while it's not trivial to get the right answers, there's a whole nother leg of work to do in terms of facilitating organizational change, convincing leaders, etc. All things we're looking for in those case interviews. Thanks for that. So with that, we will put the same question to Karl from Capgemini Invent. What makes candidates stand out when they interview with your firm?
I liked Ron's answer of grit and making sure you have perseverance and resilience. One thing that we look for a lot is, will this person, and it's hard to articulate in a resume, it's more the fit with the team. And fit with the team is also, we've realized, very hard to assess sometimes over Teams or over Google Meet. So we did look back on hiring, and I think we're doing better at hiring when we're actually meeting people face to face. So that's one thing that I think is important, is taking the time to meet and taking the time to address aspects that aren't necessarily related to the work itself, but like how you behave and how you act as a human being in teams. And so if I lift something, it's how do you collaborate? How do you work with other people? How do you resolve conflict? Things like that, because it is a grinding work sometimes, like Ron said, and working as a team for a client requires resolving conflict sometimes and making sure you're able to resolve things together.
Of course. Makes a lot of sense. So Dan, I'll take it to you last. What can make a candidate stand out when they interview with your firm?
Yeah, I'll add a dimension to this that we haven't talked about, which is depth. We really like, particularly for TMT consulting, right? And I think this goes for any industry. Not every consulting firm, wants people to focus on an industry. We really love for people to focus on an industry. We want people to have some, degree of depth. And by the way, TMT, probably too broad for any one person to know all the facets of it, right? But we love to see people who have been intellectually curious and they've said, look, I really have gone deep on the semiconductor space, or I've gone deep on mobile communications, or I've gone deep in streaming video. And here's my perspective on it. I want you to have a point of view and to be insightful. And that isn't just that we want you to be an expert in something, but that we want to know that you have that ability to really dive in, really develop expertise, develop a point of view, and bring it forward. And so having that depth and showing that you've followed through on things that you've been, curious about and maybe involved in some aspects of it, but have taken the steps to get educated, to learn more, to research, and to think about things really makes a difference. So I think depth is really a critical dimension that we look for as well.
Absolutely. Makes a ton of sense. So we've got time for just one more question here. I'll again put it to each of you for 1 minute each. I'll go in reverse alphabetical order this time, so we'll start right back with you, Dan. Let's say someone has impressed you with all those qualities, you've made them an offer, they've agreed to join the team. What does a strong start at Strategy N look like? Say day one, first 3 months, first 6 months. What are your best new joiners demonstrate? What do they look like? How can someone preparing to take on this job look to get off to the strongest possible start?
Yeah, I'm going to put this into two buckets. I'm going to say behaviors and skills, right? And in terms of behaviors, we want our new joiners to become part of the team and want to connect with people as quickly as possible. We work on, of course, getting everyone on projects, but we want you to get to know people. Get to know people in your office, get to know people in the practice, get to know people on your project team. The worst thing for somebody to come in and do as a new joiner is kind of to sit back and wait for the first project to come their way. It'll come. But the best thing you can do is start to develop those relationships now, because the relationships are what really carry you forward and what accelerates your development. And in terms of development, yes, we want people to develop strong consulting skills. And I always say that the new joiners really typically focus on two things, right? One is analytical skills, whether it's hardcore quantitative analytics modeling, et cetera, use of AI, or whether it's research skills, et cetera, kind of more qualitative, doing interviews, et cetera. All of those things are things that will come with time, but getting interest in them and seeking feedback is really important. Same thing on communications, written, verbal, presentations, emails, slideware, you name it. Ask for feedback. Feedback is a gift, and the more that we can, have people who want the feedback and want to accelerate their own growth, that's the way to start on the right foot.
Absolutely, could not agree more with all those sentiments. All right, guys, we just got about 3 minutes left here, so I'd like to just try to keep it to 1 minute on the answer to the same question. Let's start that off with Karl. What does a strong start at Capgemini look like?
We here in the US, we put people into what we call the institute for the first couple of months to make sure that they learn skills that they might not have learned in engineering or business school or wherever they come from, and make sure that they, the new cohort as a team, get to know each other, but they also engage with more senior people, and they tackle questions that are kind of sent to them by existing project teams. But we put them in kind of a safe environment for the first couple of months to prepare them. So the first couple of months at Invent looks good in the way that they are being prepared and honed for then going out to meet clients. Then after that institute time, it's really important to get on project, honestly, work with teams, meet clients, be on client side, realize what it means to walk in with expectation of being what it is to be a consultant, and kind of learn everything from having your consulting guard up to participating in different settings with the project team, and facing off with clients who might be extremely more senior and experienced than you. But what we do is we have this institute time for people who come from school directly.
Okay. So, Ron, I'm sure you've heard some things here that you'll agree with. What builds might you have when you join Bain? What's a strong start look like?
I would say 3 things. Invest in relationships, as Dan said. 2 is, I would say, be a cause, is what we say, which is, don't go to your manager with, here's my problem. Go to your manager with, here's my problem, and here are 3 potential solutions. Help me work through it, or whatever. Help solve problems. We call it be a cause. And then lastly is really focused on the answer. It's very easy to get caught up in your day-to-day work and your analysis. But what what are you really trying to tell the client at the end of the day? Start with that, and then fill in everything in beyond that.
All right, thank you. And as always, last but not least, Gregor, what builds might you have on what we've heard here?
Yeah, I think all the answers were great answers. They resonate with me. So maybe I'll give a very practical example. For example, pre-AI interview note taking would be one of the typical tasks. And what makes a person stand out really compared to somebody else is if you do the note taking, and also we do still take notes. You come back to your engagement manager, for example, not fulfilling the task, saying here are the notes, but you rather come back with here are my 5 key takeaways. These are the next 3 things I would focus on for the client based on this interview. And by the way, here are the structured notes in the back if you like reading them. So you've taken them structuredly, but you do drive forward the answer. So you go beyond what is asked, not just the note taking, but what are the key insights? What are the next steps? And as Ron said, I think be the cause and drive the solution forward.
All right. Thank you, Gregor. All right, that will conclude our time here this afternoon, at least here in Ohio. It's afternoon. Thank you for joining us from all over the world. I'll hand things back over to Japheth to close this session off.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Rick, and thank you to each of our incredible panelists. It's been just an honor and a privilege to listen in on and just be in the background here on this conversation. So, folks, make sure to connect with each of these firms. Scan the QR code that I'm popping up right here. So I'll leave it for about 20 seconds, so you can get that and get all the good stuff. But just thank you so much, panelists. Thank you, audience, for tuning in. And we hope to see you on another panel here soon. We've got life sciences coming up in February 2026, and we've got a whole slate of incredible topics for the next 12 months as well. So make sure to tune into those. All right. Thanks all.